Hey folks, welcome back. This is Chris live in central Pennsylvania with my guest, Neil Diamond. No, not that Neil Diamond. We covered this last time. No rendition this week, Caroline today. But welcome back to the program, Neil. It's a pleasure to have you back. Now, before you say anything, let me address something in the chat very quickly, okay? So you had agreed to come on last week with the program, and then we weren't in touch. I assumed you got busy as the weekend came along. I wasn't able to reach you because we're just in touch by email. And then I didn't hear from you, and I wasn't able to reach you yesterday. So I surmised, as an intelligence analyst with a dearth of information, which is frequently what intelligence analysts have, just a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here, a little bit there. I surmised that perhaps the situation was that you might have been caught up in that London Heathrow kerfuffle where the power station went out and we couldn't hear from you. Some of my viewers said, I got to turn that off just a second about that, folks. I wasn't quite ready there. I had the alert box on. Let me turn that off. But some of my viewers were like, well, he's just not coming on for this reason, that reason. I said, well, let's wait and see. You got your mail this morning and you said, hey, happy to come on, and we scheduled for today. Did you, in fact, get caught up in the London electrical fire, unable to land in Heathrow?
Yeah, good afternoon to you, Colonel Chris, and to your listeners and viewers. I was traveling back from South Africa via Europe, and my flight from Copenhagen was via London back to Atlanta. So needless to say, with all the mess happening at Heathrow over the weekend, I had to find a different flight. And unfortunately, that was the direct SAS flight from Copenhagen to Atlanta, which only came in late last night. So yeah, my apologies. I had a bit of a travel hiccup, and that's quite normal in the US. So I've learned to navigate that.
Well, it's certainly quite normal since January. We've had a lot of aviation near misses and mishaps, and the thing over the river in DC, that was pretty crazy. But I mean, that was not to get away from the topic at hand, but that was kind of an accident begging to happen. I mean, it has been, those corridors are so tight. I mean, I worked at Bolling Air Force Base where that helicopter corridor is right there in the same path for that runway. We were fortunate it hasn't happened before, but anyway, let's hope that we don't have mishaps like that again. And then the plane in Canada flipping over, that was insane. Thankfully, everybody survived. Matt, that made me think about flying. You know, people, are you coming back to South Africa, Chris? Are you serious? Not with that airline. That was Delta. Anyway, all right, so Neil, welcome back to the program. It's a pleasure to have you back. I think that today we want to talk to you about your trip to South Africa, to the American Embassy in Hatfield, and then tell us a bit about that, because you turned over a list of names, and I took the number that you had, assuming heads of household, and extrapolated that. Then I took this Americanas Group number of the 23,000 they gave today, I think, and then the number of inquiries we found out that went to the embassy, put it all together. There's some overlap. Some people wrote to all groups, but that's potentially as many as 480,000 people when you put all the numbers together with family of 4 average size. You know, there's some single people, some widows, widowers, some families with 6 kids. So you go with an average of 4. There's a lot of interest. That doesn't mean any of these people are going to come to America, but there's a lot of interest. I want you to tell us a little bit about your trip to Pretoria, and then I think we need to dispel some myths about yourself and about South African Chamber of Commerce. So, Neil, what was your trip like, and what prompted it with this list of names?
Yeah, thank you, Colonel Chris. As you know, the history of this whole event, we basically were one of the first organizations to share the information out of the US, maybe even before some of the news agencies. And as a result, people kind of thought that there's nobody to reach out to get more information, so they reached out to us. We stopped sharing information, as I shared with you and your listeners, when we got to about 20,000. We saw at that stage that the rapid increase in the number was creating some instability within South Africa, both racial instability, but also uncertainty and instability in people. So we shut it down. We didn't share any information beyond that. But we also got to a stage 6 weeks later that our board took a decision that this is not our role. This is not our space to be. This is the domain of the U.S. government, specifically the USCIS, U.S. Customs and Immigration Services, and they are the group that should really be dealing with it. You would know that we reached out to the U.S. Embassy and the U.S. State Department to make the email address available, which they did about a week later. But following on there, people just still continue to register on our website for information only, I must add. But we kind of got to a stage where we were like, well, we need to hand this over to the US, and the appropriate grouping that we decided to approach was the US Embassy in South Africa. That's the group that we had a relationship with. And myself and a small delegation traveled out to South Africa to meet with the embassy in Pretoria and hand over our list of 67,042 names. Now, I can just say what we did is we took out any duplicates or dual registered individuals so that we've got a fairly accurate list of people that we could provide the US Embassy. Even though they were very thankful for us sharing the information with them, they made it very clear that for people to be eligible to participate in this program, they would have to register with the US State Department themselves directly, that the US Embassy cannot accept a third party schedule of people. It's almost like me applying for a visa on behalf of somebody else. So even though they were appreciative of us sharing the information, they asked us to be clear and to share with everybody that they do need to register directly at the email address provided. I believe it is Pretoria, prminfo@states.gov, and that would allow them access to be vetted as part of the application process for refugees. So it was a very fruitful engagement. It was definitely worth our while. And with the handover of the information, as the chamber, we exited that space so that we can return to our core mandate, which is the promotion of trade, investment, and tourism between the United States and South Africa. We are a US-based organization, so we've got a very keen interest in the facilitation of that trade flow between the two countries. And we wanted to make sure that we are responsible in handing over the information to the US Embassy to do justice to those folks that entrusted us with their information and that requested information with us. We did share a number of newsletters. I think there was a total of 7 newsletters that went out to people in the process to keep them updated. I am confident to share that the US Embassy informed that they are in the background busy with that process. I know that you've already shared some information of folks that were contacted and outreaches have started taking place. I understand that the vetting process is happening in the background on that. So we are very comfortable that the US has not just left the process, that they are busy with it. We also know that there has been some delays in Washington, D.C. Obviously, this is happening at the very beginning of a new administration, and we need to create a little bit of space for that administration to ensure that the process is run correctly. I'm not convinced that it's going to be the exact same process as the UCIS asylum and refugee brochure spells out, because let's be honest, South Africans are not exactly in the same position as some of those nations that have that have had refugees in the past. So they are more than likely looking at putting something together that would be tailor-made for South Africa and for those interested and affected parties that would want to take up President Trump's very gracious offer of resettling Afrikaans or ethnic minorities in South Africa to the United States. That's a new term that I was recently alerted to. So, we are excited that we did what we could in the process of providing information, but we are now exiting that space, Colonel Chris. We are now redirecting our attention as well to take hands with the diaspora leadership. In actual fact, we'll be having a diaspora leaders engagement in the next 2 weeks to see how we could compile lists of names of people that would be willing to accommodate refugees, support refugees, and provide them with access to either employment opportunities or at least steer them in the right direction when they arrive in the US. We've got a very vibrant and dynamic diaspora community in the US, and we don't want to see our fellow South Africans being in a high rise in an overpopulated city when they come to the US. We know that there are definite opportunities for us as a diaspora to give better support to those South Africans wanting to come over. I'm going to pause there and then we can speak further.
Yeah, absolutely. That's quite a bit there, and a number of questions come in. Let me address a few of them. Which, first off, people asking where can I register? Well, you can't register. What you can do is register interest in a program by writing to the email at the embassy. Something that we were unsure of because the embassy didn't confirm it. Now, Neil, I'm going to let the cat out of the bag here. I mean, we talked. I think I'm okay doing this because I'm going to say something that applies to both of us. You're a naturalized U.S. citizen, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, well, then when I say our government, and that's why I wanted to make sure that people knew you were an American citizen, our government, in my opinion, has done a very poor job at strategic communications with this program. Now, the irony for me is I come out smelling like a rose. Everything I've said has been 100% correct. Finally, today, the embassy released an updated list of frequently asked questions, which address some of the things which I've been addressing since the very beginning of the 7th of February. You guys were among the first, as was I, less than 2 hours after President Trump put his tweet out. I'd seen his tweet. I analyzed it. I went online, double-checked my understanding of U.S. immigration law, the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1980, and then I went live for 3.5 hours. And then I only quit because Gareth Cliff had me on as a guest on Cliff Central. Then I came back on. I worked till 4 a.m. I had over 50,000 viewers that night. But I'm going to crow because I was right about this. And your visit confirms what I said. They are working on it. The vetting process is beginning in the background. And this is probably going to be some sort of hybrid because it's what's known as in-country refugee status. Nobody in South Africa is a legal refugee. I mean, except the people that fled from Somalia and DRC and are in South Africa and the refugee program there. But no South Africans are refugees legally under the definition of refugee. However, the U.S. will accept them with refugee status if they meet a certain condition. And right now, that condition is Afrikaners who are suffering unjust racial oppression. We need to wait and find out what the U.S. government defines as an Afrikaner, because my definition is broader than many Boers and many Afrikaners. So my point is that that this is hybrid, as you've just said. That confirms what I said, that this is not exactly a country where people are fleeing from artillery rounds and rapes and murders and stuff like that. This is a country where things are in place and we're granting status based on oppression or perceived oppression of a particular group. That sounds like it jives with what your experience was in Pretoria.
Yes, that's exactly what my experience was in Pretoria. I don't think any South Africans are expected to leave the country so that they can be in a neutral nation under which they will then be granted refugee status. But to be honest with you, we don't have a final set of facts. The frequently asked questions is maybe the most that we've had. I don't want to say anything negative about the information flow. I think President Trump's executive order, like many of the other executive orders, was the first part of the process to unfold or give effect to what the executive order ultimately wanted. We've got positive feedback that in DC things are progressing. I think it would be unfair for me to share exact what the embassy shared with me. That is their prerogative to provide that information. I'm very thankful for the release of the frequently asked questions, because that will at least give South Africans comfort. What gave us a lot of comfort was that President Trump did retweet on Truth and Social that the process is still ongoing, that he's still committed to bring Afrikaners to the United States. We were really concerned at one stage because there was just a lack of general information. Plus, there were a lot of folks speaking out of various channels to the White House, to Senate, to the Congress, to the House. And we were worried that these messages may have adversely affected the executive order. At this stage, we are very comfortable that the process is going forward. We're just awaiting what the actual criteria would be and what the procedures would be for the resettlement of those people interested. But they have to register directly with the embassy. They need to register their interest with the embassy. It cannot happen through a third party. And we'd like to add our voice to that of the U.S. Embassy in South Africa to caution people not to take up offers of third parties that are charging folks to be part of a refugee program, or are graciously sharing draft letters of what they should send to the U.S. Embassy. People should avoid at all costs any third party that would act as an intermediary between them and the US government. We have said in every single communication that this process is a process of the US government. We only provide information, and that we cannot assist or support any refugee applications. That must be done directly with the US State Department and the US Embassy in Pretoria. So we'd like to reaffirm that call to people to be mindful and vigilant, not to spend money for third parties that would possibly act on their behalf. People have to act directly with the US State Department.
Well, Neil, that's something I said in the first 10 minutes of my live broadcast on the evening of 7 February is beware of charlatans, hucksters, shysters who are going to ask you for money. U.S. refugee program costs nothing. The only cost to this is your travel to the States. And if you don't have the money to pay for your flight, the International Organization of Migration, the IOM, normally fronts that free charge, no interest loan to people to fly to America. The expectation is you begin paying it back 6 months after you come. And if there are people get here and they aren't sound financial footing after 6 months, it can be delayed. So you don't even pay for your flight. You have to pay eventually. But now pets are a whole other story, but I can get into that. But no, listen. So look, I mean, I think people need to realize the South African Chamber of Commerce USA is here to facilitate business ties between the U.S. and South Africa on behalf of businesses in the U.S. and South Africa, owned by South Africans and Americans and others. And so you've got a particular constituency that you respond to, and it wasn't people interested in refugee program. You just happened to announce it and got inundated with this stuff, and then you felt an obligation to try to help people out. I'm in the same way. I report on news around the world, but my news broadcast is unique. I always start with South Africa because I think it's a very important place, and it gets neglected in global reporting, as we can see, until recently. And so I start with South Africa, work around Africa, and then work all the spots around the world that the world is ignoring or that I think are important, and eventually come back with the news of the U.S. But people have seen me as a refugee guy. I'm not the refugee guy. I'm just here to give people the truth. And unlike a lot of these people, I've been telling them the truth all along, and I believe you've been doing the same. It appears that you've been doing the exact same thing. Now, somebody asked a question about demographics. I'm not going to, they're asking about demographics. I don't think it's appropriate for you to release the demographics of who responded because someone said, is it all farmers? Well, I will rubbish the fact that whoever expressed interest to the South African Chamber of Commerce USA were all farmers because there's only 28 to 32,000 commercial farmers left in South Africa who are white. So he had 67,000 names. So that extrapolation alone tells you that even if every farmer in South Africa said they wanted to come, a lot more people were interested than that. So folks, we don't know. I don't know if you want to answer that, but I don't think it's appropriate to show the demographics because of what's going on in South Africa. I don't want people to become targeted based on information we share.
Chris, I think you are very accurate in making that assessment. We also didn't capture those demographical information when we asked people to put their names on a database so that we could share information with them. But we did have thousands and thousands of emails that have come through. Now, even though we couldn't work through all those thousands, what we did do is a couple of them that were read and responded to gave us a clear indication of the kind of age group. And if I look at the dependents that people added on to the database that they'd registered with us, I think we can make an accurate assessment that the age group is about 25 to 45, the bulk of those interested in leaving, with dependents between 2 and 3 dependents. Now, we don't know whether those dependents are a parent or a child, but either which way, it gives us an indication of more or less a range in terms of which those folks are. Then I can tell you in no uncertain terms that we had emails from various business owners, engineers, doctors, accountants, lawyers, professional people, teachers, and farmers, of course. And interestingly enough, a very large group of our H2A workers that annually come to the US and that would like to be in the US on a more permanent basis. But I don't have an analytic breakdown of data that I can share with you on that. What I share with you is based on the emails that we've received from South Africans.
Well, in fact, I did expect there to be a fair number of the H2A folks because they have experience in America and a lot of them like it here, but then they have to go back after their temporary work visa. Those are actual genuine migrants, not the people that come into the country illegally are called migrants or immigrants. They were migrants. Okay, so guys, let me explain something very quick before we go on with Neil here. The reason the chat is on slow is there are 1,200 people in the chat and people are hitting things over and over again. My moderators are watching the chat look for misbehavior. We've got trolls. On the last chat, Someone came in who blocked me, so I can't see them. And it was after I ended the stream when the chat's still live, and they typed in the K word to try to get a screen capture. She goes, see, this channel has racist on it. Yeah. So that's an intentional effort. So my moderators are monitoring what's going on here. That's why the slow mode is on. If you don't like it, I'm sorry. You're going to have to live with it. And please pay attention to what's going on. Someone just asked, can I have the email? 8 messages above where you asked for the email was the email posted in the chat for you to find. Please pay attention. Neil, it gets incredibly frustrating. People just don't pay attention to things. But anyway, back to the conversation. Sorry, I digress. It was encouraging, I think, to see the U.S. Embassy in Hatfield put out a list of frequently asked questions. I'm just a little frustrated. And you don't have to respond to this because you're trying to facilitate trade. I'm not trying to facilitate trade. The only thing I'm looking for is to be the ambassador to South Africa, and nobody's listening to me, so I'm not going to be the guy. So that bridge is already burned, I'm pretty sure. I don't think they're talking about my name in Washington right now. Anyway, but everyone seems to think it's Joel Pollack. But anyway, my point is that I'm disappointed because I came up with those 14 questions in the course of the first night of conversations, answering people's questions, and made a video after analyzing it and looking at what I thought were the most important questions less than 4 days later. And here it takes almost 6 weeks for them to come up with this list of questions, which isn't even comprehensive. But it is a good sign that if you're interested in the refugee program, that there's work being done on it. And I think the other part of that's very encouraging, which this again drives me nuts, Neil. I did the video, you saw those videos, obviously, where I gave a summary of the 2 people went. And after the first video, people are like, oh, so if I didn't get stabbed or I've been shot, I can't go to America. Oh my gosh, that's not what we said. Please pay attention. But my point is that it took them a long time, but those 2 things, the fact that there were preliminary interviews for the American Department of State to gauge interest and what sort of stuff we're talking about here so they can bring it back to Washington and talk about it with the bureau that's responsible for it and formulate this program in a sound fashion. That's number 1, I think, important. Number 2, we just saw this from the embassy today. I think both are very encouraging signs should you be interested in refugee status.
Yeah, Chris, I don't want to comment on the time frame. Government wheels turns, unfortunately, a little bit slower than most. And maybe government has got a bigger onus to, when they say something, make sure that is accurate and correct. Because people's lives are at stake over here. We also don't want South Africans to take an uninformed decision. Sometimes out of your own circumstances or out of your own desperation, you jump at something because you think that is the solution to your problem. So we want to encourage folks to please ask questions, listen to Chris Wyatt, listen to other folks with great podcasts that can share information about what is life like in the US. Yes, you're still going to be able to bribe, but life is different. And it's maybe sometimes a little bit more difficult. It's sometimes a little bit lacquer than what it is in South Africa. But all in all, we want people to take educated decisions. And I think that's why this frequently answered questions that was released today would assist and guide. I think we are going to provide some additional information to people about what kind of income you need to live in certain states, what are the states that you should look at if you've got a certain skills match, and for people then just to be sure that when they take the decision, that they're taking the right decision for them and for their families. There's this old saying, out of the frying pan into the fire. Let's make sure that you don't exit the frying pan and end up in the fire, because we are here in the US want to welcome those South Africans that want to come. We want to support you when you come, but we also want you to be mindful of what you are signing up for. So that there's not an expectation that there is something lying on the other side. The grass is not always greener on the other side. There are a lot of benefits to living in the United States, but there are trade-offs. And maybe I should rather say that, not in a negative way. You are going to sacrifice certain things to gain other things. Life is about trade-offs in any environment.
No, and in fact, from the very beginning, I've said the same sort of thing. People get over the exact. First off, I tell people, stay away from the shysters. It costs nothing. Second thing, I'm like, if you think that your grandchildren are going to be Afrikaners after coming to America, the odds of that are pretty slim. There are exceptions. The old Spanish families of Texas and New Mexico and Southern California have retained that cultural distinctiveness that they had when that was a colony of Spain, and it's still there. It's carried on generation inculcation based on a significant saturation of people of the similar ethnic group who are there. We have the Amish, who've maintained their heritage and their first language is German 350 years later. And the Mennonites, they don't retain the German as much, but their culture, their religion. And we have exceptions. We have the Cajuns in Louisiana who were relocated from Canada who came down there. And so they retain their cultural distinctiveness. But that's unusual. And if you look at the history of Afrikaners who relocate to the UK, to Australia, to New Zealand, I mean, unless you're in Perth, which is South Africa East, I mean, it's difficult to maintain that culture. And that is going to be gone if it's important to you within a generation or two, for sure. So that's not trying to scare people away, but you have to understand that. You can't expect you're coming to Nebraska and it's going to become the Highveld. It's not going to be the case. Just going to be the case. And speaking of, things and how fast they move, well, South Africans are giving me all kind of anecdotal stories about how slow passports are and how slow home office is. Today, I had 3 more people in chat tell me that they applied for it. One got it 3 days later, their passport in hand, another 5 working days later. It took me 7 weeks to get my passport last year, Neil. 7 weeks. It cost me $3,200 to book a damn economy flight to Cape Town on Delta because I was last minute. I'm spoiled because I spent 36 years in the Army, and when I had to renew my passport, I was usually overseas or at an embassy, and I submit it there, and I get my diplomatic passport back in 2 weeks. I get my tourist passport back in 2 weeks, my official passport. But now, man, I'm just a schlub. 7 weeks for this darn thing. So I can make the elections last year. So people need to understand your point about bureaucracies can take a while. And I agree with you. The U.S. government has an obligation to get it right and state the facts. But I'm going to push back a little bit, Neil. This frequently asked question list that they came up with could have been delivered sooner. You don't have to respond to that. I'm just saying. And oh, by the way, if that kills my chance to be in the Bachelor of South Africa, so be it. I deal in straight facts. Anyway. Neil, but seriously, this is, you're right. People's lives are on the line here. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on in South Africa right now, from politicians, especially from the media. And you don't have to comment on this, but I'm incredibly frustrated, the media in South Africa. In fact, I've been mentioned in the media several times, and people distort and lie about who I am, what I do. And it's just, I understand you had an interview on Newsroom Africa. I didn't see that. Somebody said you did a fantastic job there. Congratulations. I know you had one on NewsPod as well. That one I did see. So, it's frustrating dealing with a lot of actors in South Africa who I think don't have the best interest of all South Africans at heart. And I'll just leave it at that. But you've just come back from South Africa. What's the mood? I don't know if you traveled around, if you saw old family there, or you went to hang out at your old haunts, or what you did. You just went to the embassy. Here's the list. We got to go. But what was your trip like to South Africa? Because you just went back there.
Look, I must be honest with you. I definitely popped into Turn and Tender to grab the best steak and chips, smothered with cheese sauce that I could get. So yeah.
Have you booked an appointment with your physician to check your cholesterol this week?
Well, what I can tell you is I gained about 10 pounds. So yeah, but that's a typical trip to South Africa. Now, Chris, just a personal assessment is people are angry. People are really angry. And I think it speaks to what you have said as well. You can almost say nothing right or nothing wrong because one side or another will be angry with you. When I criticize certain groups that came out to the United States to have meetings at the White House, one group was extremely angry with me. It was very upsetting to them. When I handed over the list of the 67,042 that want to come to the US, certain of my former colleagues in government, was very upset with me. It drew such a strong response from them that I was at a stage worried that I'm not going to be able to leave the country. So I think I sense a sense of frustration that spills over into anger, and that anger is palpable. It just explodes at anything and everybody that they don't agree with. There's very little tolerance. And I think race relations, even though we've made huge strides since 1994, have just gone back to a dark period in our history. And that's at both sides. I see levels of racism on chats on our chamber Facebook page. That shocks me. I can't believe that South Africans, both black and white, can actually react towards one another like that. We've pleaded for some patience, tolerance, and understanding. Let's allow those that want the opportunity to seek a better place for them and their families to be able to do that. Let's allow those that want to stay in South Africa to try and fix it from within to do that as well. But we don't need to be nasty. We can just be kind, just be nice. There's a general absence of kindness and niceness at the moment in South Africa. And I saw that in engagements with friends. I saw it in engagements with family, with my own parents. Just the way in which they react to this whole matter is surprising to me. And it's almost like people are out of character at the moment. I want to urge people to find it in their hearts just to be the South Africans that we all aspire to be. Be the South Africans that Nelson Mandela wanted us to be. We don't have to hate those that want to leave. We don't have to hate those that are not going to leave. It's still, everybody in that country is a South African and should have an opportunity to make it the best place for them and for their children. And if you believe that that is no longer the best place for you and your children, if there's no longer an alignment between you and the environment in which you live, allow them to leave. I've said this before. Many folks are not even living in the place where they were born or the town in which they were born. They moved down to Cape Town, they moved to Nelspruit, they moved to Durban. And funnily enough, that's not an issue if people move out of their ancestral homes to new provinces in the country. But now all of a sudden that folks want to move to the United States, now it's a big problem. And I think we all just need to get over ourselves. But we need to find a little bit more kindness, tolerance, and niceness with which we conduct with each other.
Well, Neil, I think those are wise words, and I agree with them 100%. I find it frustrating, and I've said all along, because people were rubbishing both sides. I had a lot of people who wanted the refugee thing, and then people come in my chat, and someone said, I'm staying, and they're like, well, screw you. And then just the opposite. I'm like, okay, knock it off. I've said it in my prepared videos. If you want to come to America, good for you. Don't rubbish people who stay behind. South Africa is your country. It's their country. They want to make it work. They want to survive there. And if you're coming to America, don't rubbish if you're staying, don't rubbish the people who want to come. That's nonsense. I mean, each individual has to make a decision in the best interest for themselves and their families. And this is Willy Wonka's golden ticket. Getting refugee status is not easy. 7.6 million Africans alone are currently sitting in camps in Chad, in Uganda, in Kenya, awaiting resettlement somewhere around the world as registered refugees with UNHCR. South Africans have been put to the front of the list, the front of the queue, based on President Trump's executive order. This is unprecedented. And so people need to calm down. And if people want to leave, they're going to leave. The vast majority of Afrikaners will be staying in South Africa. Even if 500,000 Afrikaners leave, white ones, that still leaves another 2.3 million white Afrikaners, and they'll stay. A lot of Afrikaners left after the end of the Anglo-Boer War, when their population was decimated, and they survived, and they multiplied, and they went from, a couple 100,000 to, almost 3 million, even after emigration from the 90s onwards. So people need to calm down. Now, Neil, I got to share this with you. Earlier today, between my broadcast, I called the Western Cape and talked to a 10-year-old colored boy who's being harassed at school because he's brown. And that's horrible. That's unacceptable. His mom is white and his father was colored. And a lovely young boy. It's just, we talked about it, and I told him, I said, listen, how much history can you teach a 10-year-old? But I tried to teach a little history. I said, listen, in the 1970s, when I was your age, there was a guy in South Africa called Steve Biko who espoused this thing about black consciousness, which was trying to tell black South Africans to not be ashamed of who you are. There's nothing wrong with your skin color or who you are or your appearance. That's who you are. You can't change that. Now, you can get chubbier, you can get skinnier, you can dye your hair, but you can't change who you are inside your skin. All you can do is treat others well and follow the golden rule. Treat others as you want to be treated, and be a good person. That's all you can do. And I said, I can't do anything about people giving you a hard time at school, but what I can tell you is be like a duck. Let it slide off your back. Those people are dumb. They have bigotry in their hearts for whatever reason, and you're a special person, and that's what matters. So that was my conversation with a 10-year-old colored boy in the Western Cape today. I mean, it's really sad that people, schools are always cruel. There's always bullies, but I suspect I've talked to several people who's, especially white kids recently, whose parents of their kids were being harassed at school because they're white and threatened, we're going to get you. This is off the charts nonsense that is really uncharacteristic for South Africans, I would say, Neil. I mean, it's always something politicians push, but I haven't seen this from South Africans in a long time, and it's very disheartening for me. I wish people would calm down.
Yeah, Chris, I'd like to pick up on one thing that you've said, and, it's not just kids that are bullies. Adults are bullies as well. Given some of the views and the opinions that I've shared, I've experienced bullying of a host of people on both sides that felt very strongly about things that I've said. And, this is our second discussion. That I take a very diplomatic middle road on these type of things. I try to keep a level head, and I try to share facts and information and not necessarily guide people in terms of what decisions to take. I do have views. I've got a right to have an economic view or a political view on certain issues, but that doesn't make me a bad person. And yet I find that the trolls and the haters are out there spewing negativity just because they don't like what you say or how you say it. So I feel very sorry for that. I really hope that as a country, South Africa can get beyond it. But something I can share with you, and this is just speaking from somebody that have settled in Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia. Even though it's a very culturally diverse city, very similar to the dynamics and makeups of South Africa, I don't experience racism. I don't walk around seeing racism and white people and black people hating one another. Are there incidents? Of course there are incidents. But it doesn't mean that in my day-to-day dwelling, I have that experience. My children don't have that experience. And at the moment, I'm seeing these things in South Africa. On Human Rights Day, we had one of our far-left party leaders, I don't even want to mention his name, singing "Kill the Boer, Kill the Farmer" in an environment where our own government and the judicial system cannot condemn the singing of such blatant racist songs. I fully understand that folks would rather not be in that environment. It's unhealthy for yourself, for your soul, for your well-being, for your mental vitality to be exposed to that day after day. So this trip, I was in South Africa a little bit longer than what I normally are out there, and I can honestly say that it's not nice. The racial undertones of what happens over there is just not nice. I don't have that in the United States, and that's why I enjoy coming back to the US.
Well, Neil, I understand where you're coming from there. It's I have to say that overt racism I've not experienced since I was a child. When a knife was pulled on me, I was pushed to the ground because I was white and my life was threatened. But I was like 7 years old, I think, at the time. So I haven't really experienced either. But there's always there. There's always stupid people in every society. But let me just make a point here, not picking the person who made the comment, and I won't reference it. But someone in the comment just a few moments ago, after I mentioned Steve Biko and I was relating the story to this young boy, said, well, how would he understand that? I mean, if he's colored. I mean, you're missing the point, my friend. The point, not you, Neil, the commenter. The point here is that you should be comfortable in your skin. No one should apologize for how they appear. You didn't pick your DNA. A sperm cell found that egg, and fertilization happened, and mitosis, and it split, and you were born. A mother carried you and gave birth to you and nursed you, hopefully, and took care of you and raised you and hopefully inculcated you with values and respect for human dignity and life and others. And you didn't pick your skin color. I mean, look, honestly, if it was up to me, I wouldn't have chosen to be this devastating and handsome. I just can't keep the women off me, Neil. It's hard, You're supposed to smile. That's a funny one. No, but seriously, I think the person missed the point. The point was that Biko was saying you shouldn't be ashamed of who you are. And whether he was a black man, a white man, a blue man, a green man, it doesn't matter. The point is that you shouldn't be ashamed. And that's being lost right now. And it's really sad and tragic. And also a lot of what's going on in the States, what President Trump has said has been misstated in South Africa. It's very frustrating. I rubbish that stuff every day. Trump is assaulting America. He's threatening. He's menacing. All President Trump has done is said, we're not giving any more money away. And he said it for the whole world. And then South Africa had to say, why me, when it was for the whole world. And then they got the response. It is you because you keep complaining. and he opened up the refugee program. But whom we let in our country, Neil, as refugees is up to us. It's up to us. And whom we give money to is up to us. Those aren't things that are impinging on people's sovereignty. It may have a knock-on effect for those countries, but it's not attacking their sovereignty. And that's really being distorted in South Africa right now. So your trip back was a little bit longer than usual. Did you get to any of your old haunts other than, a steak dinner? Did you do anything interesting?
Yeah, so I definitely paid a visit to Nelspruit, and there was a great game between the Pumas and SVD, Southwestern District.
Okay.
I think it was a 75-7 end result. I saw the game at Mbombela Stadium. I know that there are more than any other controversy on this chat group with me is my support for the Pumas, but I can definitely give them a huge shout out. They play magnificent. So far, they've had a great season. I love them to bits, and I'm a very proud Puma supporter. What can I say? That was a highlight of my trip, up and above my visit to the U.S. Embassy in Pretoria.
Well, look, I won't give you a hard time being a Pumas fan. They need some fans. I mean, that's they need somebody to be supporters. I will give you a hard time about the final in the Curry Cup up in Kimberley a couple years ago. My heart was broken that the Griquas didn't pull that off. Congrats to Jimmy Stonehouse and the Pumas. They did a great job there. It's kind of weird, though, seeing Devin Williams wear a Bulls jersey. I'm just saying.
You know what I can say is that Jimmy Stonehouse is in Afrikaans we use the term breier. I don't know what the English word for that would be. For somebody that prepares players, he's prepared some of the best players out there to play in many of the other provincial teams and in the national team. So I can tell you, if the Pumas were just a financially stronger team, they would have been a force to be reckoned with in the Curry Cup and in all other provincial series that is played in South Africa.
I think that goes equally well for the Cheetahs. If they were on a firm financial foot, both those clubs would be top performers. But the financing is the problem. That's a real issue here. So unfortunate for that. But of course, I'm a Stormers and Province fan, so we'll just have to. We won't give me a heartache on that. But Neil, okay, so what comes next? Okay, so. People are still going to send you stuff whether you want it or not. Do you have like an auto reply saying, thank you for your information, but we're no longer turning information over to the U.S. government. It's not our role. Here's the email address. I mean, I'm just guessing what you're doing. What is the South African Chamber of Commerce doing now that you've given this list, which, by the way, as you mentioned, the government isn't able to take recommendations from third parties, but they have a list of emails so they can reach out to people they want to, but it doesn't get you on the list. You got to contact U.S. government, express your interest. We've listed the email. If one of the mods could put that email up again for the embassy to register interest, don't write them a novel. Just write, I'm interested in this. I'm an Afrikaner. But I mean, what comes next for the South African Chamber of Commerce on this issue?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. That's a great question. Look, for us, we need to return back to our core mandate, which is the promotion of trade, investment, and tourism. We have shut down the refugee sign up on our website. We've got a note up on that page that directs people to the U.S. Embassy and the U.S. State Department with the appropriate email address. It's Pretoria, prminfo@state.gov. Where people should send their information to. If people want information, they are welcome to sign up for our newsletter. We will still share information with people as this unfolds. We're a US-based business organization, and the potential for people to come to the US and be part of us is there. And we'd like to welcome those that want to be part of our organization and the other diaspora communities within the United States. But we cannot be part of the refugee program any longer. So yeah, we've officially exited that space. We've taken off the auto reply that directs people to our website. We are responding to emails that are coming through now on a one-on-one basis, informing people what the correct process is that they should follow and that they cannot register with us. We are not an agency of the US government. It has to be, their emails has to go through straight to the US Embassy in South Africa, to the US Department of State, where they then will be officially registered to be part of this program and then vetted. Let's just be honest, the fact that you've sent in an email doesn't guarantee your participation in the program. I know that you kind of say to people, don't write a long email, but I would have kind of encouraged folks to share a little bit more information than just a name and a couple of dependents, so that if you have experienced anything that adversely affect you in line with the provisions of the executive order, that you do share that. But for the chamber side, we are not part of that process any longer. We have officially exited that. We've went out of our way to share it as far and wide as possible, both within the media and on television. But we have also started declining further interviews on the subject matter. We are happy to speak about the economic impact of an executive order, of the exodus of a large group of South Africans from the country, the economic impact on the US-South Africa relationship. There's a lot happening in that space. We are gravely concerned about our AGOA and almost 80,000 jobs just in the automotive sector that could possibly be at risk. As an organization, we are directing our attention to do as much as we can to ensure the inclusion of South Africa in AGOA if that is possible. But just given the facts of the last 7 days, and I'm referring specifically, to the letter of Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, to former Ambassador Ibrahim Rasool. Just the fact that for the first time ever, a South African ambassador has been declared persona non grata gives us a clear indication, I think, where we are headed with regards to AGOA. It's going to have a huge financial blow. As a business organization and our members as business people, we are looking to see how can we take business beyond politics? How can we exercise economic diplomacy, build those strong economic ties, and hopefully in the future that could lay a foundation for a re-establishment of more cordial links between the two governments. At this stage, I don't see that happening. So we need to do what we can through hard economic diplomacy as well as cultural diplomacy. That includes sports. We've got a couple of nice things that we are planning so that we can try and keep the relationship alive on a non-political level, Chris.
Well, a couple things, and then I want to get back to that, but a couple things when we get the chat to come in here. Pumas fan, Province fan, but there's Blues fan or Bulls fans in the crowd. Uns Blut is blue. I got it. Okay, we know you're there. I'll tell Steve Hofmeyer when I get off air. I'll send him a note. Tell him the Bulls fans were here. Yeah, but seriously, hey, the Bulls are the best team in the URC right now, so I can't give them a hard time. Anyway, besides, I'm a huge Kurtley RNC fan, even though he's not playing right now. But so there was a question over here. You can take prerogative answers, not I suspect the answer is no, but Afrikaners are very suspicious because the history of the community as it's become a cultural group. Question is, were those 67,000 names given to the South African government? I don't imagine they were.
No, that information was not shared with anybody outside of our chamber and the US Embassy. And we've gone ahead to close out that database, that it's not accessible or available. We don't want to find a data breach that all of a sudden this information was strictly shared with the US Embassy in South Africa and with nobody else.
And to be clear about that, because I know what the next question is going to be, because I know how suspicious Afrikaners are, we have lots of direct hire South Africans who work in our embassy, but that information was not shared with South African nationals. It was shared with U.S. State Department employees, U.S. citizens, correct?
The hard copy of this information was given directly to Phil Nelson, the Deputy Chief of Mission.
Who just came in from Nigeria. Is that correct?
Well, the new Shahzade affairs that came in from Nigeria started on Monday. Our meeting was on Tuesday.
Okay, so this is one of the political officers, probably, or economic officers.
It's the most senior
right. You gave it to
political officer at the U.S. Embassy at the time.
An American citizen. Yep. Okay.
Yes.
Just so, and people have to understand that that's important because people know that we have in Liberia, we have Liberians working in our embassy, but there's firewalls, physical and digital firewalls between some things that are shared. So that's important. Not that we distrust any embassy employees, but people are suspicious. It's the nature. We all know the purpose of embassies is for relations, but it's also to gather information about the host country, whether it's the South African embassy in Washington or the Belgian embassy or the U.S. embassy in Pretoria. That's part of their mission. So anyway, I just that came up here. Okay, now back to the business thing before we wrap up here today, Neil. So you touched on something. Here's the ironic part from my perspective. Number one, it's not just South Africa. I'm not at all confident that AGOA will survive in its current form for renewal in September, October. I think it won't make it into the budget next year. I hope that's not the case. I hope it stays. But I'm concerned with the current climate right now with just Doge and this and cutting this and cutting that, cutting this. There's a lot of transactional stuff in DC. Well, what are we getting from this? Because all we get from AGOA is soft power. I mean, and look how we're being treated for soft power in South Africa. And the generosity of the American taxpayer, 75% tariffs on our poultry exports, and we don't get reciprocity. We're not asking for it. But, here's the irony. South Africa, if they weren't in this bind right now, and if AGOA is renewed, would at least temporarily have a huge artificial advantage over European car manufacturers. Because Trump is pushing for reciprocity there, and they charge 10% for our cars to be imported to Europe. Flat across the board, we charge 2.5% for European cars to come here. So that's going to be bumped up to 10% on April 2nd. If South Africa wasn't in this mess, and if they're still in AGOA, the cars and parts that come from South Africa would be getting a huge advantage coming to the U.S. Plus, the labor costs are a lot cheaper. So I think it's unfortunate, and I hope that cooler minds prevail. And I do hope that AGOA stays, although, frankly, right now, South Africa is not legally even eligible for it. I think Trump not ejecting them from it, or Congress calling for them to be ejected from it, is a very generous situation. I think it underlies a position where Trump is not threatening South Africa, because under public law, the Africa Growth Opportunity Act, you must respect private property rights. It's a key tenet of it. I've shown people where it sits in the law, the exact paragraph where it sits. And by passing the Expropriation Without Compensation Act with zero compensation, that's not respecting private property. So right now, they're not even eligible for AGOA, but they're still in it. I think that maybe politicians in South Africa need to wake up and pay attention. Hey, we're not really under siege here. Maybe we should just calm down and let's all sit down at the table. Bantu Holomisa and I had a conversation about this last week. It would be nice for adults to sit in the room and have a nice conversation and say, listen, this is where we're coming from. This is our perception from DC, why we're upset. It's not just Israel. It's also Lady R. It's not just Lady R. It's also, this, it's also that. And then South Africa say, well, we feel impinged upon and work it out. But we're not there right now. And it's going to hurt a lot of South Africans, particularly Black South Africans who are downstream from that revenue flow that comes out of that value chain, because the exports to the U.S. are usually, except for agricultural products, are high value in the value chain. Whereas the stuff you're sending to China is raw materials for the most part. And they're sending you finished goods. They get the value added in China. And in South Africa, you're getting the value added and we get the finished product. Does any of that make sense?
Chris, that's very accurate. We speak about beneficiation quite a bit, and I think that's been a narrative of the Department of Trade and Industry to basically set out the basis of how we will take our raw materials and beneficiate them so that we've got the highest and best value of those products when they're exported, underpinning and supporting jobs, economic growth and development within various communities. The reality is the US takes mostly beneficiated products from us, very little raw materials. They do take raw materials and they do take agricultural produce, but beneficiated products, the US is almost our largest trading partner as far as beneficiated products are concerned. And these are jobs. We're speaking about products that have been manufactured through workers in plants, in factories, in environments, and it could even be high-tech environments. But especially in the automotive industry, we know there's roughly 80,000 jobs that are dependent on AGOA. And in the absence of those, at least in the automotive sector, 80,000 would go lost. And then we're not speaking about the peripheral and secondary and tertiary tiered companies supporting those jobs just in the automotive sector. So we definitely are hoping that our government would firstly look at sending an ambassador to the United States that would be acceptable to the Trump administration. And then secondly, I think we need to do some introspection and we need to look and say, this is a transactional president in the United States. He did the art of the deal. What are we bringing to the table as South Africa? We cannot rock up there just with a dove and an olive branch and hope to smooth over this relationship. We are going to come with a transaction to the table because that is what the US president expects us to do. Is the climate right for it? I'm not sure. I don't know directly after a divorce if you go back and try and rekindle a marriage. I'm superly happily married. So, but yeah, I think there is a process that needs to follow from here. But the fact that you are right in terms of South Africa definitely benefiting on a very broad base out of the trade relationship with the United States is a fact. And that's why as a business organization, we are definitely getting our roots in the ground on both sides, making sure that the trade relationship is restored. We hope to still take hands with the Department of Trade and Industry, brand South Africa, Invest SA, the US Department of Commerce, the US Commercial Service, so that we can build those economic bridges. Because, Chris, those are the bridges we are going to need to walk over if we want to restore diplomatic relations with the United States. I don't necessarily think that the message that I'm sharing now has been fully internalized by the powers that be, but I still have belief that Minister Lamola, Minister Pakstow, and our president would hopefully hear this message and start acting on it so that we can have all hands on board. Everybody that is a supporter of a South Africa-US binational and bilateral relationship can put hands on deck and that we can start working to restore this relationship. But it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. And I think we should be very cautious not to rush this. We all saw what happened in the Oval Office during a meeting with President Zelensky. And I think that is the last thing we'd like to see in an engagement with South Africa and the United States. So let's start working on rebuilding, restoring this relationship. Let's see what South Africa can bring to the table. But we will play our part in strengthening the economic relationship as far as we possibly can so that there is a base for this to happen sometime downstream.
Well, Neil, I think that I'm glad you mentioned Zelensky because, quite frankly, Volodymyr Zelensky is guilty of not reading the room. Whether he was right or wrong isn't germane. He was a guest in the Oval Office and they spoke in private. They ironed out their differences or didn't iron them out in a private setting. Then they came out and he decided that he was going to take and use the platform like he always does in every setting with the European leader when they just sit back and let him talk about all the grievances he has. Hey, your grievances are valid, buddy, but that's not what the conversation's about. He didn't read the room and it went very, very badly. Of course, the international press attacked Trump, but as far as diplomacy goes, having been a diplomat in multiple embassies, Zelensky's the one that really messed up there. And I think that people need to read the room better. And I don't think that politicians in South Africa are reading the room, and we'll just leave it at that without picking any politicians. But let me shift a little bit more before we get you out of here, back to, I'm not rushing you out, but you've got other things to do. But let me get you back to, okay, South Africa, U.S. business relations. Actually, I do want to ask a question about that. Do you have a sense? I mean, the South African Chamber of Commerce, if anybody would know, you would probably know. Do you know how many South African businesses have interest or operations here in the States? I mean, I know Daimler-Benz has a BMW or a Mercedes factory down in Alabama, and BMW's in South Carolina, and Toyota's in California, and Honda's in Ohio. How many South African businesses that you communicate with have interest in the U.S. that could be harmed by bad trade relations?
Chris, at this stage, almost every single one of our members. I had a discussion with the international South African chambers, of which we are part. There are also chambers in Singapore, Mauritius, Dubai, the UK, Germany, South Korea, and Japan. And all of them kind of say exactly the same thing. Whenever there's an issue with South Africa, every single business that either does business with South Africa or represents a South African product in their country gets hurt. In this case, we've got paying and non-paying members. So our paying members will definitely get hurt because they are the more economic, vibrant companies. Our non-paying members will also get hurt because they are more of the fledgling companies, the SMMEs that are kind of building their businesses. But at this stage, we're speaking about anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 entities that do business between South Africa and the US in the United States that will be adversely affected. Other than that, we've also got about 600 US companies doing business in South Africa. They are members of my good friends over at AmCham, the American chamber in South Africa, that stands to get hurt. AmCham's members employ about 135,000 people in South Africa. And drive a massive economic impetus into our local economy in South Africa. So yeah, the impact would be large, affecting many people. Now we're just speaking about companies and individuals. So if I take the 600 of AmCham, 1,500 on our side, we're looking at over 2,000 businesses that would be affected in one way or another. Now let's drill down and look at how many employees, how many workers will be affected by those. Once you are export ready, you're not a small company anymore. So even though we have got small companies that in the US sell and distribute South African products, their producers, their manufacturers out in South Africa employ multiple people because those goods are all beneficiated goods. And that impact could be severe. I'm not willing to throw a figure on the table. I think very clever economists like Dawie Rood and others may be able to give a clearer picture of what that would be. But we're looking at a sizable amount. It's imperative for the South African government to repair the relationship with the United States. And then for those in South Africa that's got a lot to say, to maybe internalize that and use their inside voices. Because let's be honest, President Trump knows and sees everything. All the media comes to his ears. He's aware of what people say across the world. And if I just see with the return of Ambassador Rasool, what comments were made, what people said, I don't think that sits well. It cannot sit well for the reparation of this relationship when you make highly emotional, politically loaded statements in a time where you want to return the relationship to where it should be. And we need some decisive leadership in South Africa on this. It's hollow words to say, yes, we'd like to have a good relationship with the United States. How do you actually instill discipline in your South African citizens that go out and make inflammatory statements about the relationship with the US? And that is a concern for us. As South Africans in the United States, or former South Africans in the United States, we're doing our best to be good ambassadors of our country. And we recently heard a comment coming from the South African government that expats and South Africans abroad are not good citizens of our country. Maybe our government should make an effort to build good relationships with our South African expat community, because we are still making use of services at our embassies. We still need passports, birth certificates, death certificates, and consular services. I can say that in DC, we've got a great support team that does give us good support. But at the end of the day, government services still remain government services. So maybe we should also utilize our expat community as good ambassadors for our country. And that would go a long way to restore the relationship. So even just having said that expats are bad ambassadors of our country is an inflammatory statement that should not have been made.
Well, I think it's a massive own goal, Neil. I think Ghana, for example, is much brighter on this prospect. The Ghanaian government called for the year of return for the diaspora from Africa. And of course, virtually no Ghanaians, there are some, but virtually no Ghanaians in the diaspora around the world, except those recently immigrated, have any familial ties whatsoever to Ghana. And they didn't just say for those who were taken from the Gold Coast, which used to be Ghana, but from all of Africa. They opened it up and they said, hey, the year of return, we care about expats and the diaspora. I mean, this is foolhardy. I mean, Canary Wharf is full of South Africans in the financial district. You know, there's South Africans all over Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the US. And many of these people are influential and powerful and have pull and have the ability to create jobs and build ties and open doors up. And saying this about, I don't know what the numbers are, my estimate of South Africans living abroad, because if we look at the waves, initially it was mostly white South Africans, mostly left in the 90s. And then starting after Mbeki began to, as he began to leave office, it shifted more to Indians and coloreds, and then black South Africans. All this human capital is left. Some of the best and brightest aren't in South Africa, but they still have ties to South Africa. And to rubbish them, that's just a dumb own goal by whoever said that. You don't want to do that. These, you don't want to abandon people who are from your home. I mean, there are Americans who live abroad, and aside from Rosie O'Donnell, I don't really care. She can become Irish, but I mean, the Americans living in Mexico in retirement or in St. Kitts and Nevis, they're still Americans, unless they renounce their citizenship. And I think I agree, it's just really foolish. So back to that point, taking the diaspora for those who eventually come to America under this refugee status, this program, when it's implemented and promulgated and your background check is successful and your health check is successful and you actually come to America, we spend $2.7 billion per year to resettle refugees in America. Usually 30 to 150,000 is the average in a year, depending on the quotas they set up. Last year it was 40,000 from all of Africa, and we hit it. But when the Afghans came in, we took 162,000 in like 3 weeks. That was pretty crazy. So whoever comes over here, you mentioned something earlier, Neil. That's what I want to go back to. You talked about you're looking at, maybe I misunderstood, but you're looking at, as a chamber, of working with organizations here for South Africans arriving in the States, because maybe job opportunities. You talk about these 1,000, 1,500 businesses that are over here. Maybe that's something. Maybe for sponsors, maybe working with existing NGOs, because we have a network of, the federal government has over 300 NGOs around the country that they spend that money with for employment services, for transitional services, for helping people get their driver's license, get their qualifications all fixed. Is that what you were talking about earlier, or did I misunderstand? Helping out with that?
No, Chris, you fully understand me correctly. For us as the South African Chamber of Commerce, and I don't want to speak as the South African diaspora. I am one of the diaspora leaders, but I don't head the diaspora leadership group. It's important for us that we make President Trump's executive order a reality and a success. We want to see that South Africans that come to the United States are functional, contributing members to the US, making the US safer, better, and economically more prosperous. And I believe that we can do that if we provide adequate support as a business community, firstly, but secondly, as a broader diaspora. So there's no way that our chamber can sustain providing employment for 50,000 people. I'm just throwing a number out there. But in our broader diaspora, we may know of jobs. We may be connected to people that have jobs. So what we are doing at the background at the moment is we are reconfiguring a part of our website so that people can place jobs there and people can place CVs there, or resumes, as it's known in the US, so that we can connect people with employment. We know that as refugees, and this is not what we know of this program, this is just of broader programs of previous refugees, you literally get authorization to work almost immediately as you arrive in the US. So we'd like to see that any South African that wants to work can get a job and get it fairly quickly. You are eligible for a green card within a period of 12 months, and then you are eligible to naturalize within a certain period after that. 5 years. So we'd like to ensure that we support South Africans that come to the United States. And you don't have to come to Atlanta to get my support. We'd like to ensure that wherever you are based, whether you go to Texas or to North and South Dakota, California, New York, the Carolinas, or Florida, wherever you'd like to be, that we'd like to see how we can support you. And we've got some very influential South Africans heading up major US corporations. And some of them employ a significant amount of South Africans already. I'm speaking about those that are within the cruise ship industry. If you think about how many jobs are in the cruise ship industry and how lucrative those jobs are, the farms, the H2A workers, how many H2A workers could be accommodated and absorbed on US farms on a more permanent basis. There are skills in the automotive sector. South Africans that are participating in this program are not the folks sitting at home that has been unemployed for the last 10 years. Most of them are frustrated because they have got skills, they are artisans, they are professionals, but because of the color of their skin, they have not enjoyed the prosperity that South Africa has to offer to all its citizens. And they want to utilize that to ensure that their children don't suffer the same consequence based on the color of their skin.
100%. Oh my goodness, Neil, that was fantastic. But you can sense my frustration. I'll always be like, wow, that's amazing, Neil. What have I been saying for 8 weeks? My goodness, the same things Neil just said I've been saying, except the South African Chamber of Commerce trying to help out. That's the only part I didn't say. Where are you people at? I've been talking about this for weeks. My goodness. I'm going hoarse here. Speaking of things, Neil, I need a job. Just kidding. I keep turning down jobs so I can keep doing this. But listen, I don't want a job where I'm forced to eat braaibroekies that have onions on them. That's my red line. No onions on my braaibroekies. We've had a conversation about that. I don't like onions on my braaibroekies anyway. But yeah, let's go back to something else.
Chris,
Go ahead.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I have to say that is more than likely our biggest challenge is how are we going to teach American girls to make braaibroekies so that we've got wives for all these South Africans coming over.
Well, I think that amongst that crowd of names you turned over, hopefully there are a bunch of Burmaisi in there so they can come over and establish that cultural standard. But, seriously. No, look, I lost my train of thought there. We got to the braaibroekies. That always happens. But, so it won't be impossible to maintain your culture, but if you think coming to America is going to be like being in South Africa, every move is different. And I can attest to this. I've spent a fair portion of my life living overseas. I've lived in 16 foreign countries, including 8 in Africa there, 8 in Africa. And it's life is different everywhere. There are gains and there are losses. Like for instance, I can't get decent butchery meat like I was so spoiled with in Germany, going to the Metzger, the butcher, every Saturday morning, buying my cuts of meat, Black Forest ham and this, that, and the other, and getting cheeses and going to the bakery and getting my brötchen. That's a German thing it's a part of who I am. Can't get that in America, and I have to live without that. And that's but it's a small thing, but it's little things. But there are gains, living in Germany, beautiful countryside, great places to visit. You're close to everything. But there will be things from South Africa that South Africans miss. Let me ask you this question, Neil. What's the thing that you can't get or can't do in America that's South African that you miss the most? And don't tell me wearing kortbreke. I don't want to hear that.
What can I do in South Africa that I can't do in the US?
Or eat or enjoy. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me first tell you what I can do.
Okay.
So I can braai. And I can braai on charcoal. I don't have to braai on gas. There's South Africans all over the place. There's about nobody in the US that has not met a South African or were friends with a South African or has got some relationship with a South African. You can get wors over here. You can get pap. You can make your own chakalaka. And you can speak Afrikaans. I speak Afrikaans in my house. I speak Afrikaans to my children. Yes, the reality is I may not be able to speak that to my grandchildren, but that is the choice of my children, whether they want to continue with that. As I said earlier, there's definitely going to be trade-offs, but it doesn't mean that I can't speak Afrikaans to my grandchildren because I can teach them Afrikaans. Diversity doesn't mean that you need to kill your culture to embrace a new culture. But you also need to be mindful that if you decide to the United States, you cannot be like a Durban of old, the last outpost of the British Empire. We still remember those bumper stickers that everybody from Durbs drove around with. Last outpost of the British Empire. You cannot be the last outpost of the Afrikanerdom living in the United States. You need to integrate. You need to assimilate. You can't tell your new countrymen how everything is better in South Africa. The meat is better, the braaibroodjies are better, the charcoal is better, because then you should just stay. Then you should not come to the US. If you decide to come to the US, you must embrace the US. You must assimilate and integrate into the United States, and take up the pride that you can have in time to be a US citizen. I'm proud to be a US citizen. I'm proud to be an American. It doesn't mean that I'm not proud to have been born in South Africa. It doesn't mean that I choose one above the other. What it does mean is that where I live, where I'm domiciled, I participate, I integrate, I assimilate, and I become a functional and contributing member of this society. So I think that's what I'd like to share with South Africans. But I do miss a good steak. I'm not going to lie. Chips is actually the thing I miss the most. My wife always laughs and says, I order steak with my chips. I don't order chips with my steak. I love chips. I eat chips every single day when I'm in South Africa. I try and have chips at Wimpy for breakfast, chips at Ocean Basket for lunch with my fish, and chips with my steak at Turn and Tender for dinner. I love chips. I can't find nice chips in the US.
Well, that's propaganda. Stop it. Stop it.
We cut those beautiful Idaho russet potatoes ourselves at home, and we fry them up in a pot of oil on the stove so that I've got freshly made chips. It's a hell of a job, but it's fully worth it.
No, I'm not going to take that insult against America. You just need to go to Ocean City, Maryland, and get some chips on the boardwalk. They make high quality stuff there. No, but I asked you that question because you became an American. You're here and you've had this experience. I think people need to understand that and relate to it. You know, I mean, a lot of the questions I get, people act like they're immigrating to America. This isn't immigration. In effect, you do immigrate, but you're not an immigrant. Your experience, Neil, as an immigrant is very different in getting settled here and how you did it than anyone who comes under refugee status. And so there's actually, I mean, we probably don't provide much in the way of helping you come to America when you came here, but we're going to provide tons of help for refugees because that's the nature of the program. But yeah, okay, so let's just, I'm going to get rubbish that thing about the chips. We have fantastic French fries in this country. Let's be clear about that. And we have fantastic crisp in this country too. Pennsylvania has like a dozen crisp manufacturers. We got Hers, we've got Snyder's, we've got all kinds of them here. That said, for some strange reason, I've fallen in love with the Lay's barbecue chips that are sold in South Africa. They taste way better than Lay's barbecue chips sold in America. I don't know what they're putting in them, but I don't know. It's like crack cocaine, but it's very addictive. When I was with Ronaldo Jos in Port Elizabeth, we went to the store. I think it was ShopRite, or not ShopRite, Checkers, something like that. And I'm like grabbing all these little bags of these bags of Lay's potato chips. He's like, those are American. I'm like, yeah, but it don't taste the same, man. It tastes a lot better here. It's like Pizza Hut in Germany. It's a proper restaurant, not this, cardboard stuff you get in a Pizza Hut in America. All right. So, all right. Neil, I think we've kind of covered it today. Any final thoughts or things you'd like to say? Maybe a positive thing. I mean, it sounds like you've had a good experience coming to America and becoming American and trying to keep business ties going both ways. But any final thoughts? Let me give you the floor here, and unless you want to open up for some other discussion, but I think you've got some other stuff to do.
No, Chris, thank you. I've given you as much time as I possibly could to make up for my travel mishap yesterday. But I can definitely share with folks in South Africa that people in the US are friendly, they are welcoming. Everybody's got an immigrant background. Everybody can tell you what their descent is from. You don't have to be shy to be an immigrant. It's not easy either. It is going to be difficult, and it is tough. It's like moving to Cape Town. It's just as tough for somebody coming from Joburg or Nelspruit to move to Cape Town. But folks in the US have been very welcoming, very accommodating. Our children have just thrived in the school system in the United States. My daughter is currently at college studying psychology, very happy. She's got a bright future ahead of her. My son is a 10th grader. Looking forward to where he's going. My wife was able to totally reinvent herself in the United States, and she's super happy in her employment. So I want to give South Africans the encouragement that the US is the land of opportunity. Is it going to be tough? Without a doubt. The best way to explain it is like coming out of matric and starting at the age of 19. So I want people to be prepared for that as well. But with your skill, your experience, just South Africans' overall demeanor, we are hard workers, we are dedicated, we think outside of the box. You'll be able to succeed in a very short space of time. You will definitely reach the top of the pool. I don't want to say this in a negative way towards anybody else, but South Africans are the cream. We do rise to the top. And I've got hundreds of examples of South Africans that made it. If you're willing to work and put in the time, you will rise to the top. And we don't do it for ourselves. I didn't do this for myself. I did it for my children. And to see how they thrive in this community and in this new environment and in the United States as US citizens warms my heart. Yes. The thing about Afrikaans and the future of Afrikaans in the US, that is always a bit of a challenge. But it's also up to us to protect our culture, to protect our way of life. Afrikaans is not just a language, it's a religion, it's a value system. And you can still instill that value system in your children and in your grandchildren without sacrificing who you are. But you are not in South Africa if you live in the US. It is a new environment. And I wish everybody all the best on that journey that decide to take it up. I equally want to commit myself to continue to support those that stay behind in making South Africa the best country it can be through economic relations with the United States.
Neil, that's brilliant. Other than the fact that you're making out South Africans be the best, I think Americans are the best, but I'm a little biased in that respect. But no, but seriously, that was brilliant. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for indulging us a little bit extra time. I think that was very valuable for people to hear what you had to say, particularly as an immigrant to the United States. I'm not an immigrant to the U.S. I've lived all over the world, but I mean, living somewhere as a foreign national is very different than actually becoming a citizen in the country. So Neil, hopefully we'll chat again sometime soon because I need that job. No, I'm just kidding. But thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. And you have a lovely evening. I'm going to hang around for a couple minutes when you drop off and just thank people in the chat. So thanks a lot, Neil. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Colonel Chris. Always appreciate being on your show. Thank you.
All right. Cheers. Folks, Neil Diamond from the South African Chamber of Commerce, USA. He's dropping off right there. I don't know if he was able to get out. There he goes. All right. So, all right. I hope you found that informative. I did. I learned some things that was really cool and very encouraging and I think very diplomatic of Neil Diamond, what he said there. So thank you all for being on here, for watching this. Be sure to hit the like button. Let me take a look and see how we did on viewership for this one because it's late at night in South Africa. And I know most of the audience on this are in South Africa. We had 6,540 tune in so far now, 6,560. And about 1,200. We peaked around 1,300 on the stream. Stuck with us the whole time. Thank you for being here. And Lindy says he made us proud. Excellent chat, says Pan. Good interview. I really like the chat. Yep. And so, all right. I hope you appreciate, guys, that we slowed down the chat so that people could actually participate with as many people in chat. If you let it run at the full speed, then people just spam the chat and they keep getting attention. Here you've all had a chance to get your comments in. So thank you for that. All right, that's going to wrap it up for today, folks. So hopefully go watch my other video, and that was the one I did about the war for South Africa. That one was doing well earlier. Let's see how it's doing now. The war for South Africa, the hidden war. That one is at, let me see real quickly, I should say. 81,000 views, and it's still getting about 4,000 views per hour at this hour. So that's pretty good. And we've got 508 new subscribers from it. Thank you. Also, if you missed it, I did an interview with Jus Schleidem from the Oranje folks, and that one's posted on my channel too. That was from Saturday. I embargoed it till today, just posted, so you can check those out. And thank you all so much for being here. I do appreciate it. Some people appreciate the slow motion chat. Not everybody does. But you have to understand that we've got to keep things moving so that people can participate. And I hope that conversation made people feel a lot more reassured about what's going on. Okay? So you should feel more comfortable about where the data went and where it didn't go. You should feel more comfortable about the role of the South African Chamber of Commerce and what they're not doing and what they are doing. And it sounds like they're here to help businesses. I know a couple people ask about how do you get a hold of Neil. Go to the South African Chamber of Commerce USA, do a Google search. I think there's a link to it in my previous interview with Neil. I'll have to put one in for this one. And send them an email. And if it gets to him, I mean, I don't have his email to give to you. That's not my place to do that. But you can reach out and maybe they can help you if you're trying to build some business ties between South Africa and the United States. Folks, as always, it's really, so Leon says, super impressed with your channel and how it's grown. Well done. Well, thank you. But it's the people watching that are helping it grow. My solution is people get out of hand. It's already broken. So, I'm sorry, PK. I was trying to reach saying there. SV Endless says, Neil was much more neutral this time and very pleasant to listen to. And yes, I'm going to the U.S. as a non-farmer. Yeah, I don't think Neil was not neutral last time. I think that people were just chomping at the bit, and anybody that put any shade on what you expect to happen was going to get your ire. So I think people are more understanding this time and listen to what Neil had to say. Anyway, folks, look, the grass isn't always greener, but it's greener in Pennsylvania. Just don't come here. Get off my lawn. Anyway, but seriously, I hope that you found it fascinating and interesting. I know I did. Anyway, folks, no reason to apologize for chat questions unless you were disrespectful. I didn't say anybody disrespectful. So I just wanted to thank you all for being here. And best news in South Africa comes from this channel. Thank you, man. I appreciate that. And you guys have a good one. And again, my thanks to my guest, Neil Diamond. I always have to stop myself. I almost said Neil DeBeer. Neil Diamond, thank you for being here, Neil. Appreciate it. And we'll chat again sometime soon, folks. That's going to do it for today. We got over 1,000 people here. So I'm going to close with Colonel Wyatt's Anthem, because some of you have never heard this. This is a song drafted through AI for one of my viewers, and I put the images on it. So I hope you enjoy it. So cheers. Thanks a lot.
Colonel Wyatt hits the screen, got stories bold and keen. Old soldier, sharp and mean, tells truths they've never seen. Rugby lover with a roar, Africa flowing in his core. YouTube rants they can't ignore, his passion makes his heart soar. Colonel Wyatt, hear his call, shining light through it all. Trolls may rise, but he'll stand tall. Subscribe now, don't miss the brawl. Military mind, keen and wise, truths come out, no disguise. South African skies in his eyes, hear his voice, no surprise. Retired soldier with the fight, in the dark he brings the light. Angry rants, truths ignite, join the cause, join the ride. Colonel Wyatt, hear his call, shining light through it all. Trolls may rise, but he'll stand tall. Subscribe now, don't miss the brawl. Enemies knocked on his door, trolls attack, but he's more with each click. Watch him soar on the truth waves, he explodes. Colonel Wyatt, hear his call, shining light through it all. Trolls may rise, but he'll stand tall. Subscribe now, don't miss the brawl. Right now, don't miss the brawl.
Take a picture.